if we look at the resistance that took place in Poland, it was similarly together with the Yugoslavs, which you have to give it to them. These were the two largest military underground operations taking place in occupied Europe. It was practically every state function that had existed on Polish territory before the war was reproduced and upheld by this secret underground state with its own courts, education, all types of functions that were served, helping orphans, helping Jews. There was an organization and authority taking care of all of these issues. Another important part of Polish-German relations was the Warsaw Uprising and the destruction of Warsaw. It is a massacre that it hasn't really received the attention internationally that it might deserve. It is a disaster on the scale of the battle for Stalingrad or the bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki.
Yes, but I think a lot of people don't understand the military context in which the Warsaw Uprising took place, and should be seen, I think, as a legitimate battle of World War II.
Oh, absolutely.
And it is just very interesting that it took place just at a time we'd had this Russian moving west, Operation Bagration, which was actually, again, a lot of people don't hear about it, but it was Germany's largest defeat in the Second World War. Yes. They were pushed all the way back. And of course, at the time of the outbreak of the beginning of or just before the beginning of the Warsaw Uprising on the 1st of August, people had seen all these disheveled German troops moving back. The German civilians had been sort of stripping the flats they'd occupied and taking their booty west with them. And of course, shortly afterwards, a matter of weeks, days later, a fresh German army came back into Warsaw, into this region, to begin the push.
Yes.
Push back again. And of course, so the Warsaw Uprising took place within this military context.
And as you mentioned, it really should be viewed as an important battle of the war effort itself, because as you mentioned, during Operation Bagration, the Soviet forces had really swept through large swaths of territory. But once they were given the order from Stalin to halt, to make sure that some of the supply lines could be kept, that some fresh forces could come in also and replace some of the Soviet forces that were worn out. There certainly would have been a Soviet stop at Warsaw or slightly behind it, a little bit further to the west. They couldn't keep up this momentum for a prolonged time. They could have advanced a little bit more, but not all the way to Berlin in one push. We should also remember that even after the Warsaw Uprising had been crushed, the Soviet troops didn't start moving in Poland again for another good 3 months or so. So instead they changed their direction, moved south into the Balkan peninsulas, taking Hungary, Romania. And this really... it also bought the Western allies more time to take more territory in the West. If the Russians would have kept on advancing just after this short period of recuperation in front of Warsaw, then maybe we would have had a scenario in which the Red Army would have taken all of Germany, for example, and there wouldn't have been a West Germany. Maybe they would have even been able to push into the Netherlands, for example, which would have created a very different geographic reality, geopolitical reality once the Cold War. So the Battle of Warsaw, or the Warsaw Uprising rather, was certainly a battle that had great importance for the Second World War. And if we look just at the number of dead, the numbers are between 200 to 250,000, the vast majority of which were naturally the civilian population of Warsaw. We have the so-called Wola massacre in this part of town that we're recording the program. Over 3 days at the start of the uprising.
That's particularly horrific.
The Germans massacred around 50,000 people. Absolutely horrible scenes were taking place in this part of town. And this is a massacre that is practically unheard of, even though it's on the scale of Babi Yar, of the rape of Nanking. It's that scale. So the relations between Poles and Germans certainly wasn't helped by what happened here in Warsaw. And even if we look at after the uprising had failed, Heinrich Himmler famously stated that he told the Führer that this was actually an opportunity to destroy the city that had kept the Germans from advancing east for the last 700 years. And he stated that not a single stone may be left in place. Every building has to be razed to the ground. And there was an order to make sure that this would happen. They didn't succeed completely, but they weren't far from.
They came pretty close.
They came pretty close.
Do you see the photographs of what was left?
Absolutely. The German units, they were, instead of spending their time and effort on other parts, constructing war materials, preparing for the Soviet onslaught once it would restart again. It was a little bit like with the Holocaust. At that time, it wasn't really rational for the Germans to spend that much time, effort, and money on razing Warsaw to the ground or exterminating the European Jewry, instead of focusing on the battles taking place on the Western and Eastern Front. But the Germans were not always rational. There were some hatred that was that strong that it convinced them that this was something that they should do. So for 2 months, more or less, German troops were busy in Warsaw by going house to house and either burning it down or blowing it up. And depending on the numbers, if we look at Warsaw, the larger part of Warsaw, the bigger metropolis, then it was around 85% of all buildings that were either completely razed to the ground or damaged so badly that they later had to be completely reconstructed or rebuilt. It was a huge debate whether Warsaw should be rebuilt at all. There were some thoughts about making Łódź the capital city instead, and leave Warsaw as some kind of monument to the destruction of the war. But then finally they decided to rebuild it after all, but it was made complicated by the fact that they didn't always know exactly how certain parts of especially the old town had looked. But there were 23 great paintings that were left behind from an Italian artist that had arrived to Poland, Bernardo Bellotto, in Poland and Germany, better known as Canaletto. And he had painted this magnificent paintings of Warsaw and especially its old town. Some of the reconstruction that was done was based on those paintings, which had the interesting effect that in some cases the buildings were rebuilt to look even older than they had looked when they were razed to the ground. There had been some add-ons and renovation that had taken place, but was not apparent at the paintings. So Warsaw's old town got an even older look. Even to today, there is legislation in place which decides on where you are allowed to build high-rises in Warsaw. We have quite a lot of them that have been built in recent years, but there is a law that states there is this one famous painting of Canaletto from the other side of the Vistula River, from the side of Praga. And if your skyscraper would interfere with the skyline that is visible in that painting, then you simply are not given a permit to build it. So Canaletto's paintings from centuries ago still have an effect on how Warsaw looks today as a city.
Join us next time and we'll continue the story here on Poland Daily History. Thank you for watching.